Good morning all and welcome back to Mentoring Professionals. I see we have a number of the same of our usual suspects. Welcome again, Darren, Divan, Nish. Hope you enjoy this session that we're having now, and it's by Victor and Ian on risks and issues. Over to you guys. Victor.
Thank you, Dev. Hi, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, because we can see that our spread is becoming interestingly geographical with every session. Thank you so much for joining us. Victor Fashoro. I've been in the project management space for about 20 years now. Mainly these days I focus on providing best practice training, Prince 2 Agile, but I also provide to organizations that want to embed project management best practice as standards within their companies. So I am happy to have a good, highly experienced colleague backing me up today, Ian.
Hi all, Ian Murphy. So I've worked for about 20 years in IT, sort of technology background, and in the last 10 years in project and program management, primarily on the corporate side, but over a broad range of sectors from public service to banking to utilities. So hopefully between Victor and myself, we'll have a good spread of experience and be able to give you some words of wisdom today. So welcome.
Thanks, Ian. Okay. So, effective management of risks and issues, something that should be bread and butter for project managers and program managers, but is it? Okay, before we dive into that, it might be just a good idea to be very sure of the spread we have in terms of attendance geographically. So, your first audience activity, please, is to kindly share with us where you're based, where you're connecting from today. So we got the QR code and of course, menti.com with a code. And Ian is going to share the results with us.
Yep. Okay, so we can see a sample there coming through.
And we also on the chat have people from Netherlands and Norway. Okay. And London, another one from London.
Cool.
Oops.
Australia.
Mexico. Antonio, welcome.
Wow. Super.
So we had one other question to just get a feel for the audience, but might just leave this one up for another moment or two, just to allow people to pop in. So let me move it on to the second question. And you should be able to see that in your screens now, just to get a flavor for people's experience. That's good to see. We've sort of a mix between very experienced and reasonable experience. So that gives us a flavor for the audience today. So I'll stop sharing and hand it back to you, Victor.
Okay. Thanks, Ian. So I hope my screen is being seen.
Yep.
Okay, so we're in good company from the experience spread. We're in pretty good company, I would say, Ian. So quickly, just the objectives of our session today. We want everyone participating to be able to clearly distinguish between risks and issues. Because, would you believe it, in some cases, there are still some lack of clarity in some environments. Be aware of typical risk management processes or procedures that we would typically use on a project or program. Typical issue management process or procedure. Then what are the challenges for getting it done properly? We know it's got to be done. We know it's an essential part of getting our projects to deliver what we've been asked to, but what are the typical challenges? And again, we'll be sampling your contributions as well there. And finally, hey, what exactly will be the impact if we don't do this properly on our key stakeholders? Because at the end of the day, we want to make sure stakeholders are happy.
Victor, can you hear us? Because we can't hear you. Victor?
Victor, you're having a problem with your audio there, but just while he's trying to sort that out, basically at this stage we wanted to just get a bit of audience participation. So you can see the slide that Victor has up on screen there. Could you, in the chat, share with us a statement to clearly distinguish between a risk and an issue? So if you can use the Zoom chat window for that. And thanks, Geraldine, for getting the ball rolling there. Risks may happen. Issues are unplanned events that come out of the blue. And from Tinu, issue has happened. From Val, a risk, something which hasn't happened yet, could have a negative or positive impact if it takes place. And both risks and issues have to be controlled as they may affect the business case. And from Nalisha, risk is something that has the potential to happen and can be positive or negative. Issue is negative and has happened. And just to pick up on another couple of the comments from Val, issue has happened, project needs to adapt accordingly. And from Deborah, risks are things that may happen, and if they do, will have an impact on your project or business. An issue is something that has happened and needs dealing with. Yeah, all very good responses. It's just something that we often don't talk about as project managers, but risks can, as has been pointed out by a couple of people, risks can be positive or negative. And it's not often that we have to deal with the positive ones. We generally spend the time managing the negative ones. And as people have rightly called out, an issue is something that has occurred and needs to be dealt with. Okay. So the risk definition, which many of you basically pointed out to in the chat, risk is the uncertainty of the outcome. Risks relate to uncertainties that, if they were to happen, would have a negative or indeed a positive impact, which is deemed as an opportunity for the project. And the key differential to issues is it is something that has happened or will happen with certainty. It was not planned and will have an impact on project or program objectives. So the project needs a process to handle both. And in fact, there is often, if the project is well considered and set up, when an issue arises, you can often link that back to a risk. So it helps to note that when a risk event occurs, it becomes an issue, as there is no more uncertainty about that event. But often we can get issues which are completely left field, didn't come into the project risk discussions at any point. And I would say, as Dev alluded to there, COVID this year, I doubt anybody who was putting projects together in 2019 had a potential global pandemic in their risk register. So I have another audience slide here. So we're just going to give two scenarios to you. If you go to menti.com and put in that code there, I'm going to put a short, I'm going to pop it into the chat as well.
Victor, are you
Hi.
working now?
Hi, Deb. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Hey, he's back.
My sincere apologies for that. I'm on my backup system now. Hopefully, this does not give any issues. My sincere apologies. Okay. All I need though is
so Victor, if you just we're just going to have a look at the answers. We're on the case study pieces now, so I'm just going to pop that up on screen so we can see how people respond.
Okay. But Ian, please, you will continue with the slides. Yeah, continue to show the slides. I'm happy to continue presenting. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
cool.
I'll tell you.
Okay.
Yeah. Thank you.
Right. So there is the first case coming up. Actually, I should hide results while people are putting in their answers. Don't want you influenced by everybody else. So the product manager has stated that the ball bearings will be 3 weeks late. This is likely to delay the testing of the engine unit. Would you consider that a risk or an issue? Dave, can you just confirm that you're able to see my results slide?
We can see your slide. It's showing 0, 0 at the moment because you always say hit.
Okay, yeah. So I'm just going to show the results. That's interesting. So with 10 responses, 4 people think it's a risk and 6 people believe it's an issue.
Okay.
Victor.
So should we do the second one and then we can...
Sure. Okay. Yeah. And case 2 then. So I'll just hide results on this. Case 2, the word from HR is that negotiations with the union are not going well. It appears they may call a strike in the winter months. Is this a risk or an issue? So 8 on the risk side and 0 votes for issue.
And where are the other 2 people who voted earlier?
Gone for coffee.
No, just me being mischievous. Okay, here they are. Super. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, everyone. Ian, could we please go back to the issue definition slide?
Sure.
And then we can discuss these results. Thank you.
Okay, are you seeing the 2 situation slides now?
Yeah.
Yes. Oh, you want me to go back to the issue definition?
Please.
Yeah, sure.
Correct.
Yeah.
Okay, folks, it's always an interesting one to have sort of practical examples looked at because project management is so contextual, isn't it? And we would suggest strongly that the first one is actually an issue. It's an issue because an issue is something that has happened or will definitely happen. And the statement actually says, the product manager has stated that the ball bearings will be late, not may be late. Obviously, the next statement is a bit of a red herring in terms of defining what's going on. This is likely to delay. Oh, that is giving us an insight into the impact of the issue. So it doesn't change the fact that it's an issue. The fact that it has an impact, that has a bit of uncertainty, is a separate matter. So the first case 1, by definition, will have to be an issue. Will, not may, be 3 weeks late. The second one, dead on right, folks, that's a risk. Okay, that's a risk we need to keep an eye on and look for mitigation actions. So the distinguishing factor between the 2, which is the point of the exercise, is issues have happened or will definitely happen, no uncertainty about them, risks, uncertainty of outcome. And that definition will embrace threats as well as opportunities. And we're basing this on the best practice definitions of risk specifically. Thanks, Ian.
So Victor, there is a question from Geraldine, and Geraldine,
Okay.
I'm not sure I really understand the question. I will read it out, but if you can actually expand on that, that'd be great. I mean, if you want to unmute yourself. Geraldine, since you
maybe I should explain it. If you
Please,
look, for example, at MSP, MSP is very explicit about risks, should they occur, become issues.
Yeah.
Prince 2 has avoided that statement and creates a bit of a grey zone, which often confuses students, and where it doesn't state anywhere within the Prince 2 manual that a risk, should it occur, then become an issue.
Yeah.
We've avoided that. We've classified issues as requests for change, off specifications, and problems concerned, but they have not mentioned anywhere that risks, should they occur, actually become issues. They've avoided that, and my question is, does anybody have any idea why they should do so?
Right. I'll be honest with you, I have no idea whether that's been not explicitly stated, because everything else around the recommendations actually support what you've said. If there's uncertainty about whether these unions are going to call a strike or not, now, the moment they call a strike for the winter months, we have an issue on our hands. So you're absolutely right. So should that be clearer in the Prince 2 manual? Jolly well should be. But you are right, and that is what we actually share with people about the practicality of this. Yeah, indeed, when the event around the issue has occurred, then around the risk definition has occurred, then definitely we have an issue. You are correct. Yes.
Mm-hmm. But then I've wondered whether it's because if you have a plan B, a contingency plan, and you've got a risk budget, so if something does occur, which potentially could occur, and you can handle it using your risk budget, well, then it's basically the risk is handled, and therefore it doesn't become an issue because you have it under control, you pre-plan for it, and you handle it without it becoming an issue. The funds are there.
Jonathan, you're doing well actually making excuses for them, but I think because they have said the risk budget, but what weakens that a little bit is the risk budget is clearly an optional accessory, so to speak, as according to Prince 2. So that's it. You don't have to have a risk budget because some projects have well worked out contingency budgets. So should it be there? I agree with you. It should be more explicit, definitely. Okay, so because the two issues and risks are through the definitions clearly distinctive things, it makes sense that we have clear processes for each of them. So if we're following best practice, we don't have to go against corporate policies. No. So it may well be there's a standard risk management procedure within the organization. We put that into our project. Okay, here's a typical one, which is supported by the Prince 2 view, but it's not the only way to do it. So there has to be some mechanism for capturing the issues. We identify the issues, we assess for probability versus impact, we do some estimation and evaluation of the issue. We then plan suitable mitigation actions, suitable responses, and then implement the response we believe is best by weighing up the advantages of that response against how much it's going to cost us. And we're back to identify again. Why? Taking action does not mean that we've necessarily removed the risk altogether. So it's a continuous thing which we ought to be doing. All the time we're doing that, we should be communicating with necessary stakeholders. But risk management, effective risk management isn't going to happen by accident on our projects. It's got to be planned. So ideally, we should have a risk management plan or risk management strategy and a risk register, which should be a repository for the risks until they're actually closed. Similarly, on the next slide, we have a typical process for managing issues. Now, again, this aligns up with the Prince 2 message, the Prince 2 approach, but the beauty of adopting this kind of process is we can safely treat changes, requests for changes, change requests, whatever terminology we use, we can treat changes as issues. And that means we maintain only one issue register for, off specifications or defects, problems or concerns, and changes as well can be handled using this. But is this the only thing we can use? No, you may well have a robust and more appropriate process that is pretty much standard within the organization. Our corporate policies should be the first look. If they can't do the job for us on the project or program, then we might recommend something else. So separate processes for both. Now we have another audience activity for you. We want this to be as interactive as possible. Here, we just want you, haven't seen those typical processes we just showed you now. On ground, in the field, what are the two most common challenges we tend to face to get this thing done properly? Now that we've defined them and looked at a typical process we could use for each of them, please use the chat box for this.
So I'll just call out a couple of them as they come in. So Val has highlighted in Val's experience, lack of communication is the top issue for effective risk management.
Yeah, I can see ownership.
And Nikki has said not being given an owner, which is very common. Deborah has highlighted project team not wanting to raise risks with the client. Another. And Nish has said issues, risks not captured effectively.
Absolutely.
Geraldine, management approaches are defined, i.e. how to handle them. So whether the approaches are there or lack of. And yeah, just a couple of other people agreeing with some of the other points being made.
Yes.
Darren saying not taking ownership.
That's right. Absolutely. Well, when we did that survey of people's experience this morning, we made the comment that we're in good company. Here's proof. Next slide, please, Ian. So here's proof that we're in good company. Some of the things you've actually mentioned are exactly what we have encountered as well. Okay, and of course, we could also, you know, put in issues relating to lack of poor communication of the mechanism to get this done. So yes, there's a process in place, but are the key players within the team aware of these processes and how they should play out? For example, are the technical specialists, the team managers, are they aware that issues ought to be raised immediately? They don't wait till the next time-driven report to tell the project manager about an issue. No, issues should be raised immediately. So, and then with risks, sometimes in carrying out our assessments, are we suffering from optimism bias? Are we too sort of overconfident about the way things are going to make reasonable assessments? Another reason why our risk management activities should not be done in isolation. We need to engage with others. And right from identification, the first step, we should have risk workshops, for example, right? And make sure that we get others involved. One other thing that could be a problem, would you believe it, in the case of risks is even the way the risk is stated can actually create issues. So when we identify and capture the risk, we're going to see that with this next slide, the way we describe our risks for further analysis by the team can create issues. Next slide, please. Ian. So the best practice mechanism for defining or describing a risk, whether it's in the risk register or in the business case, in the case of major risks, is to actually make sure the risk statement clearly says the cause of the uncertainty. What is the source of this uncertainty? The event, what is it that could happen? And the effect is pretty much saying, if this were to happen without any mitigation action, here's the impact on the project. Because that's why we're bothered about this uncertainty, because it can have an impact on the project. Now, when this is not done, there can be issues. Let me just give a quick example. If I were to give a statement stating a risk along these lines, there we go. There is a risk that I could be late to deliver a seminar at the Heathrow Airport Conference Center. There is a risk that I could be late to deliver a seminar at the Heathrow Airport Conference Center. I need your help with that risk. Please give me some help with that risk in the chat. There is a risk I could be late to deliver a seminar at the Heathrow Airport Conference Center.
So what kind of help are you looking for, Victor?
Yeah, well, this is it. I need help to deal with the risk. So assuming it's a risk workshop, and I've just stated the risk, there is a risk I could be late. So we're all playing, we're in a risk workshop, right? And I say, the next risk we're going to analyze together is there's a risk I could be late to deliver a seminar at the Heathrow Airport Conference Center. Typically, when we state things like this in a workshop, there is either or both of two things happen. One, there is a long silence before anyone can provide any mitigation actions. Or people now have to ask questions to understand the risk. Why are you going to be late? What's going to be, I mean, they should not be starting with, questions to understand the risk if we state the risk carefully and properly. So I'm going to change that statement to actually align with the best practice definition in the slide. There is a risk, folks, that I could be late to deliver a seminar at the Heathrow Airport Conference Center due to severe traffic on the motorway or highway, and that would mean I would incur penalty costs. Please help me analyze this risk. I have a feeling that you are already, and I love that niche. Niche, you are a star, okay? Why on earth can't I travel to the airport in style? Niche will allow me to ride in his chopper, in his helicopter. There is no way the motorway traffic, can affect me if I go in his helicopter. Fantastic. Immediately we have a well-defined risk statement, it's a lot easier to come up with a variety of mitigation actions. This is the reason why even the definition at the outset when we identify the risk makes quite a bit of a difference. We're going to move on now. We're going to take questions again shortly. So we mentioned that we need a strategy or a plan, and we need a risk register. So no doubt about that. We're going to show a template of one using an Excel sheet of a risk register shortly. But let's move on, folks. We can now take your questions on these in a little while. Next one, Ian, please. What about the issues? Again, there has to be a procedure we would follow for issues. We saw a procedure earlier on that we might probably use, but again, the issue register might have elements like this. Again, we're going to look at a practical, usable risk issue register soon, so we're going to move on. We're going to move on now. Yeah. So we usually are accountable to someone, aren't we? On projects. That's a bit of an understatement. So in following up with our theme on how best to satisfy external and internal customers, stakeholders, I would like us to examine what exactly the possible impact of risk and issue management being done poorly on the stakeholders. So please, could we have some of your responses in the chat? how could poor risk management and poor issue management actually affect our stakeholders? Impact and ultimate benefit and value. Yeah. Project off track. Yeah. Over budget. Stakeholders aren't going to be pleased with that. Okay, do we have any more, Ian?
Yeah, so just an interesting one there from Nikki. A stakeholder may not know that they've been assigned a risk issue. And obviously that's where some of these risk management tools come in. Often places would run them on Excel and require monitoring and notification. Some of the more advanced tools will allow you to tag an individual and they get sort of automatic updates that they've been identified, et cetera, et cetera. So obviously not everybody has access to those. So then you need a higher level of communication when sending that out. So.
That's right. Okay. Thank you all for that. We did mention earlier that there is a definite link between risks and issues. Okay, and I believe it was Geraldine that also further explored that. So yes, risk is uncertainty of outcome, but when the risk event actually now occurs, it's an issue. So there's definitely a link there. There's a relationship there which we need to examine, but also we do have other dependencies, okay, and every project has assumptions. So in a lot of environments, as we move into more complex projects, we may need to actually say to ourselves, perhaps it's best that we have a centralized repository to actually examine risks, issues, assumptions, and the dependencies. And I'm sure some people already know what's coming up. So there are times when we use a RAID approach, okay, to capture the risks, the assumptions, issues, and dependencies. It just makes it a lot easier to have a wholesome view of exactly what's going on the project. So the benefits wouldn't surprise us. So typical benefits of using a RAID approach. On the next slide. Next one, please, Ian. Okay, so it keeps us far better organized because we're tracking information in a centralized manner, okay, and easier to store and retrieve information, okay. All the different logs are in one central repository and gives stakeholders confidence that actually we're keeping an eye on the key aspects of the project effectively. Of course, we're providing visibility as well. And again, it makes sure that, look, areas like assumptions that can be easily underestimated or forgotten or not given as much attention as they should are actually factored in decision making. Okay, and of course, it would also make sure that they're less likely that we have, loss of accountability for mitigation actions. There's also a sense of ownership, that it promotes a sense of ownership within the team. Okay, and of course, it means anyone can raise an issue and flag, a risk, and we collectively look at the way these things are panning out. Then there is, of course, the benefit of making it, easier to audit what's going on the project. Okay, and now we're just going to take a look at the sort of typical formats you could have for an issue register. Okay, and so this would typically be in an Excel sheet, and we have one for the risk register as well. And of course, our RAID log will simply, please, could you go back to that? Thanks, yeah. Okay, so these are, templates. If we're interested in any templates at all, we have templates that I could share these templates, but I'm sure we've encountered some already. So at this point, we're gonna ask for questions, and then we will then talk about, hey, what's the major areas that are influencing our approaches to managing uncertainty within projects and programs. So we'll discuss two things: uncertainty management and scenario planning. But before that, please, let's take questions. Please feel free to unmute yourselves, contribute, challenge, whatever you've heard or seen. We'll be quite happy to answer your questions. So I'll say a little bit about scenario planning and uncertainty management in a minute. Questions, please.
It's Tola here.
Oh, hi.
Hello. One thing I don't know, maybe you can touch on is the impact of risk from different perspectives at project level, at operational level, possibly program level, organizational level, because the impact may differ, but the risk may still be the same.
That's a pretty good question, actually. Thanks, Tola. When we showed earlier a slide that had the sample risk management strategy, one of the headings there was risk categorization. And the categorization of risks can actually, in simple terms, be based on which area of the business is actually most affected, because this helps us to also identify owners of the risk appropriately. So we have risks that could be at the technical level, we have risks that will be at the project level as a whole, we have risks that could be at the program level, and we have risks that could be at the strategic corporate level. So it's important, as Tola has said, to bear in mind the actual management structure and be aware of which levels within the governance structure is actually most affected by the risk. And that also helps in terms of escalation in some situations. So definitely part of the categorization will be, is this the technical level risk? Is this project level? Is this program level? In which case it might affect several projects within the program. And is this a strategic business risk to the corporate environment? Tola, I hope that addresses.
It does. I just want to add one thing, is that you can have the same risk. So if you have the same risk, it might have a different impact at business as usual level, but it means, and it has this different impact at program level. It means that same risk has to be stated as many times as where it impacts. You don't just state a single risk and then, say, what's it called? If you have one risk which is impacting different places and has a different effect, you have to state each of those risks individually.
Well, as long as we're mindful of the fact that our risk registers for our projects are primarily for risk to the project. And so we just need to be mindful of the fact that we might have the opportunity to escalate certain things to the business as a lesson, right, that we've learned through our risk management activities. So there are ways in which we can just minimize duplication in that respect. Yeah.
So Val has raised a point which is a common issue. I find that people are sometimes scared, in quotes, to flag risks or issues up the chain. That can create a multitude of problems along the way. How would we suggest people are encouraged and become more comfortable at sharing this information up?
Yeah, that's a pretty good question, and this is unfortunately quite common in environments where the fear of God is put into people and the blame culture exists. And I think part of addressing this issue is the way we start off projects, making sure that there is a collective responsibility, and yet we clearly distinguish the individual responsibilities for each of the roles that are involved. So yes, we're in it together, yeah, and we do have specific responsibilities. And clarity about the need to encourage a sharing, collaborative working environment is absolutely critical. And the project managers in the main get this. We're skilled at leadership and team building, to different levels. But it's important that the corporate entity also gets it. So we may have to provide, workshops ahead of time, to make clear to the, the corporate entity, the stakeholder, the approach we're going to use towards this. So when they embrace this collaborative non-blame culture, it does help a great deal.
Yeah, and another aspect is a formula that's used in the sort of scaling of a risk, the likelihood and impact. Yes. And that can be used to encourage people as well, because it's not when people are asked to put an objective likelihood or an objective outcome on it, it tends to depersonalize the raising of the risk. It's not. It becomes a sort of a broader. It's clear to everyone in the project team or the steerco, and that is a useful way of non-personalizing raising these items.
Yeah, absolutely. I like Darren's point. If people don't raise risks, I would raise scenarios and drag risks out of them. That's an interesting one, because we're going to finish off in a minute with the areas that are developing that are going to influence us, increasingly in the way we manage risks within the business, within projects, and within programs. And definitely scenario planning is one of them. So we're actually playing with different, possible scenarios, different outcomes, and saying, if this is the outcome we have, how do we handle that? So that's the really interesting point, Darren. Yeah. Do we have any other questions?
So Geraldine was asking earlier in the chat about, the tools that you use. Are Excel spreadsheets the best way to manage risks and issues, and are there better tools out there? So
okay.
We were having a small bit of chat on it in the chat, and
okay.
I suppose one of the things that has struck me over the years is, and I think Jaran noted it as well, is that Excel often tends to be a sort of a personal tool. Obviously now with more cloud-based environments, it's easier to share those sheets and have multiple contributors editing or whatever on them, but they still require quite an element of management and communication on them. When you do, I suppose we're sort of conscious, we don't particularly want to recommend tools in this environment, but the one recently that I'm using called Keyed In. I wouldn't say it's head and shoulders above others, but again, it has this idea. It captures all those key columns that Victor mentioned when he was outlining the components of a risk and an issue. So they're there for you straight away. It also does things like it does your calculations on likelihood and impact, and then prioritizes those items above everything else. So it does a bit of the work for you, and it also does, when you tag and assign a risk or an issue to somebody, they get automatic alerts and it appears in their dashboards, etc. So these tools can help out, but I just know again from experience that it generally I find it has to come from a PMO to develop this, because a PMO doesn't want a myriad of tools in the environment. Absolutely. Because they want to see consistency in the way projects are reported on as well. So
that's right. That's right. And do you mind if I ask, Ian, is that tool free?
No, it's not. Okay. I'm not aware. I must have. I'll have a look in the licensing, and we can get back to people afterwards. So
okay,
no.
I can safely say that if we use project management, to like projects in a box, it's amazing. Of course, they have the free community version, and they have the enterprise version, but even the free version helps us to actually capture issues and risks beautifully, and it does have modules that support all your Prince2 reports as well. So interesting what you can do with some of the free tools as well. So projects in a box is one that I would definitely say take a look at.
So there is one more question from Geraldine about organizations being immature with risk management. So how can they quickly acquire the knowledge to define probability and impact of risks?
Sorry, I'm going to just, Dev, I'm going to ask you to please repeat that.
So I'll repeat it there, Dev. So Geraldine was asking how in an organization that's immature, starting off in terms of risk management, how can they quickly acquire the knowledge on how to define probability and the impact of risks? So one thing for me on that is getting a representative grouping of people in the organization for that sort of risk workshop. If it's going to be an operational risk, so say something say in an airline industry, it's going to impact on the desk staff at the airport. Make sure you have suitable representation from that area in the workshop, and they will be able to give an appropriate level of the impact when you're working out these various risks. So for me, the project manager knows the scope of the project, so get a suitable set of participants or stakeholders in that risk management session, and it's their bread and butter. They don't need to be afraid of things like what's the impact number or what does that mean when you multiply two numbers together and it's a 16 risk. They just tell you how they feel about it, and then the PM translates that.
That's right. Keeping it simple and populating the workshop with the right stakeholders.
That's an interesting point from Geran there. In early days, had no respect for risks and didn't talk about it. Then with larger projects, he found that to be really critical and raised as many risks as possible, so that I had the solution ready when it occurred. Yeah. Now it is a balancing act. You can sit down and go 5 risks, 10 risks. What's a suitable number of risks? There's no answer to that. It's like what's appropriate for the scenarios that you're dealing with. I mean, a good measure of how successful you have been in your risk selection is when issues occur that you can tag them back to a risk. Then you can feel that you've had a good understanding of what the potential risks can be. Like I said at the start, you'll still get left field issues that will have no bearing on your risks. But by and large, if an issue occurs, it should have come from a risk that was considered.
Okay, so that's part of managing that relationship again, isn't it? Yeah. So when we are analyzing the impact of an issue, we need to be sure that we check what risks might be associated with it. And when a risk actually happens, then we have an issue on our hands. So it's again being clear about the relationship between the two. Thanks, Miriam. Okay, we're going to now actually just mention two areas that are of interest as we wrap up. Ian, could you just go for the slide on the scenario planning and the uncertainty management, please?
Yeah, uncertainty management is up there now, Victor.
Okay. Now, it's just that we need to keep looking for sort of new thinking, improved mechanisms for getting our job done. And two areas are really gaining ground now: uncertainty management. So there are actually other considerations that we may need to factor in that will help us get it right, do a better job for our organizations, our projects and programs. And so uncertainty management is one of them. This is one of the books that I have found that are sort of highly recommended in that area. So effectively, we're saying here that we are looking at the relevant stakeholders and being aware of what the key stakeholders and what their sort of motives are, what they really want long term, and how their expectations long term can actually affect the projects and programs we run. So we would have a process that helps us to manage this, and that would include being aware in the first instance of exactly what these what the stakeholders' expectations are, and what uncertainty is generated by specific stakeholders and their own contributions to the corporate environment and the projects and programs we run. Now, there are processes already identified for this. A great deal of research has gone into this, and found that we can actually reduce the negative impact to our organizations if we embrace new approaches like this. The second one is scenario planning, which of course, is being used by sectors like the military for quite a while. So we are going to be looking at different scenarios and how that will play out, and picking up on, the risks that these could generate. So there are two books here which might be of interest to us if we wanted to look more into this. So there are other areas that could help us do a better job further down the line. And there are different techniques mentioned in the books that really are helpful. Okay, but there are topics in their own right for a different seminar altogether. So we just thought we should mention that. And if there are no other questions, I think that's it from us.
Okay, thank you very much, Victor and Ian.
Responsive.
So once again, the video will be made available over the next couple of weeks, and we hope you enjoyed the session. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you all.
Ian and
thanks all.
stay on.
Bye now.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you all. Thanks.